Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli wa nusallim ala rasulihil kareem amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Now this is the final of the 4 sessions before we go on to the Kahoot. So far we've learnt about Hadhrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu and how he was brought up in harsh conditions, and we also learnt about how he accepted Islam. Now we will discuss the virtues of Hadhrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu. The word virtues, it means the good things of Hadhrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu. So one of the main things is, after Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam passed away, Hazrat Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, he became the Khalifa. After Hazrat Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, it was Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu. So the greatest Sahabi after Hazrat Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu is Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu. In his time, Islam had entered most of the land surrounding Arabia, because Islam in the time of Hadhrat Umar radhiyallahu anhu increased so much that you have Arabia, and many of the lands around Arabia were now conquered and they became Muslim lands. And he was a very powerful ruler, Hadhrat Umar radhiyallahu anhu, because he was strong and brave and courageous. The Muslims took over many parts. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam also said about him that if there were to be a prophet after me, it would be Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu. But the question is, can there be a prophet after Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam? There cannot be. But Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was saying, if there were to be, then it would be Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu. And how amazing is that? That he had all the good qualities that a prophet would have. But obviously prophets are the best. After the prophets come the Sahabah. And from the Sahabah, it's Hazrat Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu. And after him, it's Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu. Another virtue of Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu is that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said about him, never does shaitan meet you in a pathway except that he begins to walk on a path other than your path. That even shaitan gets scared. That why do you think this was? Because shaitan is scared of Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu. Normally the people were scared of him because he was so strong and brave and he always spoke the truth. So the people that would lie would obviously get scared. And shaitan is the biggest liar, so obviously he would get scared. Imagine walking in the path Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu is walking, and who would get scared? Shaitan would get scared of him. So imagine how great he must have been. That takes us on to his bravery. He was really brave and he took part in every battle with the Prophet ﷺ. He never ever stayed behind from a battle that the Prophet ﷺ was in. He always defended the Prophet ﷺ. He always defended Islam. And it was through him that Islam carried on rising. And even in the time when he became the Khalifa, when he became the leader of the Muslims, Islam spread far and wide because of his help. And in fact, he was helping Islam since the day he accepted Islam. And we learned already that on the day he accepted Islam, the Muslims prayed namaz where? In front of the Kaaba, when they weren't allowed to pray in front of the Kaaba because of his strength. Do you think he was one of the greatest people in the world ever in history? So definitely, after all the prophets, it was the Sahabah, and he was the second greatest of the Sahabah. So he was definitely one of the greatest in the world. Now there's a very emotional story mentioned of Hazrat Umar radhiyallahu anhu. We think of him as really strong and brave, which he definitely was. But he was also really, really kind and compassionate and caring as well. That at the time when he was the Khalifa, he would cover himself and he would walk in the streets of Medina during the night. Imagine it's nighttime and you're all sleeping and we're all sleeping at night. But what would he do? He wouldn't be sleeping. He would walk in the streets of Medina. And why would he do this? Because he wanted to see if anyone needed any help. Is there anyone that needs anything, any food, any water? Are they in any trouble that I can help them? He was the leader of the Muslims and he himself is going out and he himself is very old. And when he reached the outskirts of Medina, he saw a fire. And he thought to himself, why is there a fire in the middle of the night? It doesn't make any sense. There must be someone that needs some help. So what did he do? He went to see what was going on. And there he saw a woman and she was stirring a pot. There were children sleeping around her as well. So Hazrat Umar radhiyallahu anhu was thinking, why is she cooking food at this time? Who was this woman? She was just a woman that had come to Medina and she had stayed on the outskirts of Medina because she didn't have a home to live in. And she had nothing. She had no possessions. She had no food, no money. So she said, I am a poor woman with no house and no food. I stir the pot so the children fall asleep with hope, thinking there's food inside the pot, when actually there is no food inside the pot. So with hope of food, they just fall asleep. And then in the morning, when they wake up and they realize they have no food, they'll start crying again. They'll start begging for food. But because they have no food, I'll do the same thing. And then they'll fall asleep. And like that, you would do that to calm them down. Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu told her to be a little patient. Just wait for a few moments. And what did he do? Even though he was so old, and he was in charge of a massive kingdom himself, he was the Amirul Mu'mineen, the leader of the believers. He went home, all the way walking in the middle of the night, and he brought out 2 bags filled with food, and he carried it himself all the way to the old woman. And he had servants, but he carried it himself. Can you imagine a leader of today doing this? The leader of today would tell his servants to do it, or anyone working for him to do it. But Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu did it himself with his own 2 hands. And what did he do? He went all the way to the old woman and he began preparing the food by himself. He put the food in the pot and started stirring and started adding other things inside. And the children, they ate to their full because he took it out in plates for them. And the children ate to their full, and the woman was really pleased with him in the end. That this is the man that should be Khalifa, not realizing that this is the Khalifa Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu. If you were to ever become a leader, what type of a leader would you become? How would you behave? Would you be caring and considerate of people? Would you sacrifice your sleep for the happiness of others? Inshallah. Now we'll move on to near the end of the life of Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu, that he went for Hajj. It was a 23rd Hijri, 23 years after Hijrah had happened. After performing Hajj, he raised his hands to the sky and he said, "O Allah, I have grown old. My strength has weakened. The people under me have become scattered. There's too many people to look after. Take me in. O Allah, give me death before I commit an act of neglect, before I do something which I'm not meant to do, before I do something which I wasn't really supposed to be doing." So this is the dua that he made. And he then returned to Medina, and it was not long after that he did pass away. Look at how much he cared about everyone under him, that he didn't want to do anything wrong to anyone under him. There were thousands and thousands of people living under him, but he didn't want to do anything wrong to even one person. He didn't even want to oppress even one person. Now, Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu, the moment had arrived for the world to go in chaos. The world was crying and the world was sad. Why? Because it was time of Fajr namaz in the morning. And he was leading the salah. Who was? Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu. When a slave who was not a Muslim, he came and he stabbed Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu and a few other Sahabah that came in his way. The people had never ever suffered a calamity in their lives as great as this. That in the masjid, while namaz is going on, this had happened. Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu was injured really badly. He was taken home. And now everyone around him knew that there's not long left until Hazrat Umar does pass away. So Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu, he knew he was going to pass away now as well. So he said that go to Hazrat Aisha RadhiyAllahu Anha. Who was Hazrat Aisha RadhiyAllahu Anha? She was the wife of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the daughter of, we did it last week, Hazrat Abu Bakr RadhiyAllahu Anhu. And he said, go to her and ask her if I can be buried next to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and next to Hazrat Abu Bakr RadhiyAllahu Anhu. And in the end, she agreed. She said, definitely you can. You can be buried there. Where is Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu buried? He is buried in Medina. In fact, next to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, next to Hazrat Abu Bakr RadhiyAllahu Anhu. If you take a look at the picture, can you spot where he's buried? So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is buried behind here. Abu Bakr RadhiyAllahu Anhu is buried here. And Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu is buried behind here on this side. So they're all 3 friends are buried together. The burial, he was 63 years old. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was also 63 years old. Hazrat Abu Bakr RadhiyAllahu Anhu was also 63. And Hazrat Umar RadhiyAllahu Anhu was also 63 years old. He was the Khalifa for 13 years. That's a very long time. He passed away on Wednesday in the month of Dhul Hijjah, which is the last month of the Islamic calendar. And Suhaib bin Sinan, he led the Janazah namaz. Everyone was crying upon this because Hazrat Umar was a great leader. Everyone loved him. And because of him, Islam spread far and wide. Who became the next Khalifa? It was Hazrat Uthman RadhiyAllahu Anhu. Before Hazrat Uthman RadhiyAllahu Anhu, you'll have to join us next week on Sunday at 3 p.m. as well, where we'll discuss the life of Hazrat Uthman